Hey friends, Jim here with Science Talk. Very interesting, quick article I saw in the online publication EOS. The bottom of the Arctic is blooming. Hmm. Researchers found phytoplankton hidden on the Arctic seafloor, hinting at a cascade of effects on the local ecology and the carbon cycle. So what's happening? Okay, there's a research vessel in the Arctic Ocean amongst the sea ice. Brings back memories. Researchers made an unexpected discovery in the Arctic Ocean, seemingly blooming communities of plankton near the sea floor. Whew. Every year in the spring, the Arctic Ocean blooms. Instead of, surface waters basically are inundated with microscopic algae. And then after the bloom exhausted the nutrients on the surface, the plankton sink to the seafloor, and in the absence of light, they die or remain in a stable, but like say resting state. At least that was what we thought. A new study in global change biology, however, uncovered that in the summer, phytoplankton could bloom at the bottom of the Arctic. In the summer of 2016, Takuhei Shiozaki, co-author of the study and a researcher at the University of Tokyo, was on board a scientific cruise conducting investigations in the Arctic. While taking routine samples and measurements in the Chukchi Sea, Shiozaki and his colleagues found that instead of being in a stable state with low productivity, algae and water samples from the seafloor showed high primary production, indicating a bloom. The effects of climate change are especially severe in the Arctic, causing the region to warm at a rate nearly 4 times as fast as the rest of the planet. Many marine areas that used to be covered by ice year-round are now ice-free in the summer. Shizaki and his team speculated that this lack of ice, coupled with seasonally transparent water and increases in the amount of solar radiation absorbed, referred to as irradiance, allows sunlight to reach the bottom of the ocean in shallow areas, triggering phytoplankton blooms. Very interesting and extremely plausible mechanism. Really, no argument there. Makes perfect sense. But the thing is, in the shallow areas, so that the phytoplankton are still basically within a photic zone. So shallow areas, of course, refers to the shelf systems. To support their hypothesis, the research team returned to the Chukchi Sea to take more samples. They conducted a lab experiment recreating seafloor temperature, light conditions, incubating sediment samples of 24 days with seawater filtered for organisms. Basically, a controlled setting to replicate in situ conditions. Microscopic algae bloomed in the samples, even when irradiance was only 1% of what was normally found on the surface. Lars Christian Lund Hansen, a researcher at Aarhus University in Denmark, was surprised by the results and hopes to have more proof of algal blooms. Instead of doing experiments with the sediments, it would be great if they could somehow conduct an experiment in situ to make sure that these algae are really alive. Well, I can understand doing the controlled experiments just to see if you got something. The next step would be to do in situ investigation. So it's not an either or. Think of this as a preliminary to kind of get an idea what could be happening, and then develop a hypothesis, go out in the field and test said hypothesis. If there is indeed primary production going on at the bottom of the ocean, the implication could be far-reaching. As phytoplankton form the basis of the food web in the Arctic, bottom blooms could alter the ecosystem, according to authors of the 2020 Arctic Report Card. For example, previously documented algal blooms indirectly contributed to increases in bowhead whale populations. The hidden blooms could also have an impact on the carbon cycle, as phytoplankton remove carbon from the environment during photosynthesis. Investigations of the carbon sequestration capacity of the Arctic Ocean have focused on surface processes, says Shiozaki. However, assuming that carbon is actively fixed by phytoplankton in the subsurface, this process should be taken into account. Valid point. Can't argue with that. The first step to greater understanding of the diatoms is an accurate estimation of how widespread the hidden blooms may be. So that you might want to look at the East Siberian, the Laptev, the Kara Sea, the Barren, look at those shelf systems and see what's going on there, if a similar thing is going on there. Especially that those areas are warming up and they tend to lose the ice on the Eurasian side before losing the ice on the North American side of the Arctic Ocean basin. So, and that's basically what it's saying here. So they want to how widespread are these hidden blooms? To reach such an estimation, scientists model the irradiance at the seafloor based on satellite data from the Arctic Shelf region, where many areas are shallow enough to support blooms. Stuff on the Eurasian side. The model showed that bottom blooms could theoretically occur in almost a quarter of the region. And they go on to say, we got more work to do, and this might improve our biogeochemical cycling understanding, and so forth. Now, here's what I find interesting. Now, we're losing the ice. Now, I did a video on sea algae, but I have argued that if you're losing the ice, you're losing overall productivity. Why did I say that? When the ice melts, you get that meltwater there creates a little local stabilization, little stratification there, and you get what's called ice edge productivity. So you get a phytoplankton bloom there. If there is no snow cover on the ice, then the sunlight can go through the ice. That promotes the growth of ice algae on the underside of the ice, and they, of course, do their photosynthetic thing, contributing biomass to the ecosystem. And if you lose the ice, you then lose those two sources of productivity. And for the pelagic diatoms, they're obviously referring to benthic diatoms. That's my take on this. They're referring to benthic diatom, actually living on the substrate. So technically it would be called epibenthic. Benthic is in the substrate, epibenthic is on the substrate. But, before the pelagic diatoms can do their thing, the sun angle has to be high enough to activate the electron transport chain in the chloroplast so that photosynthesis can ensue. Now, if they're saying they got bloom taking place on the seafloor bottom, that implies the epibenthic diatoms. Now, the question is, does the sunlight level have to get sufficiently high enough, just like with the pelagic, to stimulate? But since this seems to be a previously unreported area of productivity, it could be that this is a way to compensate for the loss of productivity from losing ice edge productivity and underside of ice from the algae productivity. This could be a way. Nature always finds a way, as Malcolm said in Jurassic Park. But nature does find a way. So this is extremely interesting, and so this would be a good thing because this would help offset some of the primary productivity losses to replenish a deficit there. But then that, of course, helps the ecosystem because now if you have this productivity, then you have the zooplankton and the little fish and so on, up to, as mentioned here, bowhead whales. And then, of course, that now leads to a whole new research into what does this do for biogeochemical cycling. You know, carbon being the obvious example. Does this help sequester carbon? Probably so. So this is exciting, and now we have a whole new area of research to investigate what's going on, and then make an over, and start ascertaining overall what's happening in terms of overall productivity, total productivity for top to bottom for the Arctic oceans. What does this do to the ecosystems, to the trophic levels and the trophic interactions? What does this do for all the biogeochemical cyclings and so forth? And this, and then we probably need to adjust. This is science. So this does, as it says here, it does have major implications. And basically, time will tell what this reveals and its impact and importance. So stay tuned for this one here. I look forward to seeing more reporting and more studies on this. So I wanted to share that with you. Perhaps a bit of good news, in the middle of all the dire news we've been getting. But that this is very interesting, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for your time.